She seemed out of place. Her scuffed shoes, wrinkled shirt, and a violin wrapped in an old cloth made her look like she didn't belong. The moment she walked in, laughter filled the room. Did the cleaning staff get lost? Is this a music audition or a charity event? Someone joked. A plastic chair was tossed her way. Leave the nice chairs for the real musicians. A student handed her a dusty, out-of-tune practice violin. Let's see what a shopping cart sounds like. She didn't say anything. She just sat down and started playing. By the third note, the room went still. What they thought was junk had made the walls shake. The grand auditorium of the prestigious Harmony Academy hummed with excitement. The velvet seats were filled with polished performers holding shiny instruments. At the back of the room, almost hidden by the grandeur, sat Lily Matthews, dressed in a simple linen dress, slightly worn at the hem. It hung loosely on her slim frame. Her old scuffed shoes peeked out beneath the fabric. Her dark hair fell in soft waves over her shoulders, framing a face that was beautiful in its simplicity, quiet but striking. At 19, Lily carried herself with a quiet confidence, her hazel eyes scanning the room calmly. Today was the Academy's big annual audition for the International Showcase, a performance that could make a musician's career. The room buzzed with nervous energy as students whispered about who might get the coveted solo spot. But Lily sat alone, her hands folded neatly in her lap, a worn violin case resting at her feet. She wasn't here for fame. She had something more personal in mind. Across the room, Professor Linda Moore, known for her tough standards, leaned toward her colleague, Dr. Daniel Brooks. Her gaze fell on Lily, and a smirk appeared. "Look at that one," she whispered, nodding toward the back row. "Bold of her to think she belongs under the spotlight." Dr. Brooks, a tall man with a sharp sense of humor, followed her gaze and laughed. "What's next? Auditioning in a sack of potatoes?" Their laughter caught attention, and soon whispers spread through the room. Students turned to look at Lily, their faces a mix of pity and amusement. Some covered their mouths to hide their smiles. Lily's expression stayed calm, though her fingers tightened slightly around the handle of her violin case. She'd faced judgment before, countless times. It wasn't new, but it still hurt. In the front row, Mark Dawson, a violin prodigy with slick-back hair and a well-fitted blazer, overheard the mockery. His reputation as the Academy's shining star was well-earned, but so was his arrogance. He leaned toward his friend, Mia Foster, a flutist known for her sharp tongue, and smirked. "She looks like she came straight from a thrift store," Mark said loudly enough for everyone around to hear. "What's she even doing here?" Mia giggled, tossing her glossy hair. "Probably lost on her way to a street performance." The room burst into soft laughter, and Mark's confidence grew. He stood, brushing imaginary lint from his sleeve, and addressed the crowd with exaggerated kindness. "To be fair," he began. His voice dripped with sarcasm. "Let's at least give her a chance, if only for our entertainment." The laughter grew louder, bolder. A few students clapped, as if her embarrassment was a performance in itself. As Lily made her way across the room to grab her violin case, Mia Foster stood up suddenly, her flute catching the light from the chandeliers. "Hold on," she called, her voice sharp and dramatic. "Let's make sure everyone gets a good look at our star performer." She pointed at Lily's dress with exaggerated pity, her lips twisting into a sneer. "I mean, really, did you think this was a costume party? Or do you just not own a mirror?" The room erupted in laughter, some students pointing and snickering. Lily's cheeks flushed, not from shame, but from the cruel weight of their mockery. Mia sat back down, satisfied, as whispers of pathetic and embarrassing spread through the crowd. Lily's eyes flicked toward Mark, but she didn't react. Instead, she tilted her head slightly as if studying him. Her silence only fueled the room's cruelty. Professor Moore raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. "Well, Dawson, since you're so generous, why don't you fetch her an instrument? Let's see if she can at least hold a bow properly." Mark grinned and strode to a storage closet at the side of the stage. He returned with an old, neglected violin, its varnish chipped, its strings dull and slightly rusted. It was an instrument the Academy hadn't bothered to maintain. He handed it to Lily with a dramatic bow. "You're Stradivarius, my lady," he said, prompting another round of laughter. Lily rose gracefully, her movements slow and purposeful. She took the violin without a word, her fingers brushing the worn wood gently, but the crowd didn't notice. She walked toward the stage, her steps steady despite the weight of every eye on her. The auditorium fell into a mocking silence, anticipation crackling in the air like static. Before Lily could reach the stage, Professor Moore raised her hand, silencing the room with a single gesture, her cold, marble-like gaze fixed on Lily's humble appearance. "Miss Matthews, is it?" she asked, her voice thick with condescension. "I must commend your bravery. Most people would know better than to waste our time with such a—" She paused, glancing at Lily's shoes. "Humble presentation." The word hung in the air like an insult, and a few students snickered, emboldened by the professor's authority. Lily met her gaze without flinching, but the professor's words stung deeper than the laughter. It was a harsh reminder that she didn't belong here. Dr. Brooks leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. "This should be interesting," he muttered. Mia whispered to the girl beside her. $10 says she can't even play a scale." Lily stood alone under the harsh spotlight, the beam highlighting her simple appearance. She adjusted the violin's pegs with practiced ease, her fingers moving with quiet confidence, in stark contrast to the disdain in the room. The strings, though out of tune, responded to her touch, and within moments she had coaxed them into place. She tested the bow, drawing it lightly across the strings, and a soft, clear note cut through the silence. As Lily adjusted the violin's pegs, Mark leaned forward in his seat. His voice echoed across the quiet auditorium. "Careful with that relic," he mocked, standing to loom over the edge of the stage. He stepped closer, his shadow falling over her, and flicked a speck of dust off his sleeve, as if her presence made the air dirty. "Wouldn't want you to break it, or yourself, trying to impress us," he sneered. A few of his friends laughed, encouraging him, and he leaned in, his voice low but full of venom. "Why don't you just quit now? Save us all the second-hand embarrassment." Lily's fingers paused for a brief moment on the strings, but she didn't look up. Her focus remained, a shield against his looming presence. Mark snorted from his seat. "Beginner's luck," he muttered. Lily closed her eyes briefly, as if to center herself. As she lifted the violin to her chin, a murmur spread through the crowd, growing into a chorus of mocking whispers. "She's actually going to try," one student hissed loud enough for others to hear. Another added, "Bet she learned from YouTube tutorials." Someone in the back row mimicked a screeching violin, drawing stifled laughter that quickly spread through the crowd. The sound of mockery grew, pressing down on Lily from all sides, daring her to fail. But she stood tall, her posture straight, her eyes closing for a moment, not in defeat, but in defiance. Then, without hesitation, she drew the bow across the strings. The first note was soft but precise, a delicate thread of sound that hung in the air. The second note was richer, more commanding. By the third, the room fell completely silent. She launched into Carmen Fantasy by Sarasa, a piece known for its technical challenges and fiery passion. The music flowed from her like a storm. Each note was clear, every phrase alive with intensity. Her bow danced across the strings, pulling impossible clarity from the battered instrument. Her fingers moved through intricate passages, never faltering, never rushing. The melody surged and retreated, now playful, now heartbreaking, spelling out a story that held the audience in a trance. Professor Moore's smirk vanished. She leaned forward, gripping the arms of her chair. Dr. Brooks's mouth dropped open, and his pen slipped from his fingers, clattering to the floor. Mark's confident grin froze, then faded completely. Mia's eyes widened, her flute forgotten in her lap. Lily played as if the room didn't exist. Her body swayed slightly with the music, but her face remained calm, her focus unwavering. Despite the flaws of the violin, it sang under her hands, its voice raw yet powerful. She handled the piece's trickiest parts with breathtaking precision, her phrasing revealing years, decades of dedication. From the wings, a young assistant professor, Clara Ninguin, whispered to herself, "That's how Menu Hin used to play it." The final note rang out, sharp and triumphant, before fading into complete silence. For a moment, no one moved. Then the auditorium burst into applause, stunned, fervent, and unstoppable. Students leaped to their feet, their earlier mockery forgotten. Even those who had laughed the loudest now clapped, their faces a mix of awe and regret. Lily lowered the violin, her breath steady, her expression unchanged. She didn't bask in the applause or acknowledge the crowd's sudden admiration. She simply stood there, the worn instrument cradled in her hands, waiting. Professor Moore was the first to speak, her voice unsteady. "Young lady, what is your name?" "Matthews," she answered softly, her tone polite but firm. Dr. Brooks stood, adjusting his glasses as if trying to see her more clearly. "Where did you train, Miss Matthews?" That was extraordinary. The room leaned forward, eager for her response. Lily's lips curved into a small, almost nostalgic smile. "I was Professor Harper's last student," she said quietly, "before he passed. I just wanted his music to keep living." The room fell silent again, the weight of her words settling over them like a heavy fog. Professor Samuel Harper had been a legend, a reclusive genius whose performances had changed the violin world for an entire generation. He was notorious for refusing formal students, claiming no one was worthy of his time. For years, whispers had circulated that he'd taken on one apprentice in his final days, but no one knew who or if the rumor was even true. Clara Ningwin gasped audibly, her hand flying to her mouth. "You studied with Samuel Harper?" Lily nodded once, her eyes distant. "He taught me for 3 years until the end." The panelists exchanged nervous glances, their faces pale. Professor Moore's earlier amusement vanished, replaced by something closer to fear. Dr. Brooks sank back in his chair, muttering, "My God!" Mark shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his hands clenched into fists. Mia stared at the floor, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. The room's earlier cruelty now hung in the air like an uncomfortable shadow. Professor Moore cleared her throat, trying to regain control. "Miss Matthews, that was an exceptional performance. We'd like to offer you the solo position in the International Showcase. It's a rare opportunity." "Thank you," Lily interrupted gently, "but I'd rather not take the solo." A murmur of surprise rippled through the crowd. Mark's head snapped up, his eyes narrowing as if he couldn't understand her refusal. Lily continued, her voice steady but warm. "I'd like to propose something else. There are students out there who love music as much as I do, but can't afford to study here. If I'm chosen for anything, I'd ask that the Academy create a scholarship fund in Professor Harper's name for them." The panelists blinked, caught off guard. Dr. Brooks recovered first, nodding slowly. "That's a generous request, Miss Matthews. We'll take it under serious consideration." "It's not about generosity," Lily said, her gaze unwavering. "It's about what's right. Music shouldn't be locked behind a paywall." The room went silent again, her words ringing with a clarity that shamed the earlier mockery. Clara Ningwayne wiped a tear from her cheek, her expression full of quiet admiration. Professor Moore hesitated, then nodded. "Very well, we'll discuss the scholarship immediately. But Miss Matthews, you must understand, your performance has earned you a place here today. Your talent is undeniable." Lily inclined her head, a gesture of acknowledgement rather than agreement. "Thank you, but I didn't come here to prove myself. I came to honor my teacher." With that, she stepped off the stage, the violin still in hand. The applause followed her, softer now, almost reverent. As she passed the front row, Mark averted his eyes, his jaw tight. Mia twisted her flute in her hands, unable to meet Lily's gaze. In the days that followed, the Academy buzzed with talk of Lily's performance. Students whispered about the audition in hushed tones, as if afraid to disturb the memory. The panel held an emergency meeting, and within a week, the Samuel Harper Scholarship Fund was announced, a full-ride program for talented musicians from underserved communities. Lily's name was attached to the initiative, though she had insisted it honor Harper alone. The consequences for those who had mocked her were swift and decisive. Mark Dawson was suspended for a semester, his actions deemed a violation of the Academy's code of conduct. The day after the audition, the Academy's main hall was packed for an emergency assembly. Mark stood before the faculty, his usual confidence gone, replaced by a flush of humiliation. Professor Moore, her face grim, announced his suspension to the silent crowd. Your actions have disgraced this institution, she said, her voice sharp and commanding. You mocked a peer whose talent far surpasses your own. For that, you will spend a semester reflecting. Off campus, Mark's eyes were fixed on the floor as he walked, the weight of every gaze crushing his pride. Whispers followed him, the golden boy now a cautionary tale. His future at the academy hung by a thread. Mia Foster faced a similar consequence. Her scholarship was placed under review. Mia's reckoning came during a private meeting with the Academy's disciplinary board. Her scholarship, once a symbol of pride, was now in jeopardy. Her flute performances were overshadowed by her role in Lily's humiliation. Dr. Brooks, who had laughed at Mia's taunts, now sat stoically as he read the board's decision. Her funding was placed on probation, with her reinstatement contingent on a public apology and mandatory ethics training. Mia's hands trembled as she left the room, her sharp tongue now silenced. Her status among her peers crumbled. The news spread quickly, a stark reminder that talent alone could not erase cruelty. Professor Moore and Dr. Brooks issued public apologies, their words carefully crafted but sincere. The Academy's culture shifted, even if just slightly, as students whispered about the girl who turned their world upside down. Lily, meanwhile, continued her studies quietly. She attended classes, practiced in empty rehearsal rooms, and declined every interview request that came her way. When asked why she had refused the solo, she simply said, "The music matters more than the stage." One evening, as she was leaving the academy, a younger student, a shy pianist named Sarah, approached her. "Lily," she said hesitantly, "I was there at the audition. I didn't laugh, but I didn't stop them either." "I'm sorry." Lily smiled, her eyes kind. "You're here now. That's what matters." Sarah, clutching her sheet music, stood taller. "What you did, it changed things. People are talking about the scholarship, about Harper, about you." "I didn't do it for me," Lily said, adjusting the strap of her violin case. "I did it for him, and for anyone who's ever been told they don't belong." As she walked away, her silhouette framed against the setting sun, Sarah overheard a passing student whisper to another, "She doesn't need the spotlight, she is the light." Lily's steps didn't falter. She had no need for their praise, no desire for their redemption. She carried Harper's music within her, and that was enough.